Hi, friends. I'm Scott Giles, and welcome to Power Talk, my podcast here on Facebook Live and YouTube. I cover topics related to spirituality, hypno-coaching, and the hypnotic arts and sciences generally. If you want to know more about my professional work or sign up for my free e-newsletter, Power Lines, check out my website, which I'll tag at the end of this video. Today I want to talk about how to deal with people who present themselves as know-it-alls, by which I mean people who present themselves as having an authority or a body of knowledge that they do not in fact possess. Now there is a formal name for this behavior called the Dunning-Kruger Effect. It is one of the biases that people sometimes have in their thinking where they overestimate how much they know about something and they don't realize it because they don't have an awareness about the limitations of what they do know. This was formalized in a 1999 paper by Cornell University psychologists David Dunning and Justin Kruger. They tested people on the basis of their general knowledge and discovered that the people in the bottom ranking actually self-rated themselves as having expertise. Basically, really smart, self-aware, and learned people know a lot about their chosen fields of activity, but nobody can know everything. Therefore, the people who have self-awareness know how much information there actually is and about the limitations of the subset they actually do know. For example, an accomplished chef will have a degree of mastery about the areas of culinary work he or she uses most frequently, and will have a general knowledge about the field as a whole, but he or she will also be honestly aware that there is an immense amount of information out there in world cuisine, rare ingredients, specialized techniques that they don't know. That is to say, they are smart and trained well enough to be aware of what they do not know. Therefore, they know when to call in a colleague with a different skill set to fill in a gap rather than blundering on themselves and making mistakes. Well, this is true of any area of human knowledge. People who are smart and well-trained know their stuff, but they also know the limits of their stuff. They have what we call metacognition, or the ability to think about their thinking and to analyze their own performance and abilities with an honest critique. The problem comes when we get someone who knows a little about an area of knowledge but doesn't really have a grasp on the size and shape of the whole of that area. They believe their knowledge is more complete than it actually is. So not only do they mess up, they sometimes don't even appreciate how big a mess they've made. As a hypnotist, when I coach people, I often hit upon the theme of self-confidence. It's important. People need to believe in themselves. However, that said, that belief needs to be tied to reality as well. No amount of confidence can replace learning and experience, but it's an easy trap to fall into. I mean, if you go from an area of having no knowledge about a topic to having some knowledge, it's easy to assume that you know a lot. I mean, you have considerably increased your knowledge and know more than you used to. But that's not expertise. One of the humorists I most enjoy is Garrison Keillor, who had a radio program for years called Prairie Home Companion, which featured a fictional community called Lake Wobegon, supposedly in Minnesota. There was a standard line that in Lake Wobegon, all the women are strong, all the men are good looking, and all the children are above average. What's so funny about that meme is that everyone knows it's not possible for everyone to be strong, because if it were, then strong would have no special meaning. It would just be the way everyone was. Ditto for everyone being handsome. And obviously, all the children can't be above average, or the word average has no meaning. This points to the tendency we all have to overestimate our abilities, achievements, and performance. This has actually come to be called the Lake Wobegon Effect, and it is essentially the same as the Dunning-Kruger Effect. In some schools of coaching, we talk about people who are legends in their own minds, and that's not a compliment. However, the Dunning-Kruger effect, or the Lake Wobegon effect if you prefer, is something created by the brain at its default setting. Consider that a recent piece of work by Chip and Dan Heath, and you can read about it in their book titled Switch. They found that only 2% of high school seniors believe their leadership skills are below average. Well, you can't have 98% of the population having leadership skills that are above average. That's not what average means. They found that 25% of the people believe that they're in the top 1% in their ability to get along with others. That 94% of college professors report themselves as doing above average work, which is ridiculous because average doesn't mean 94%. And people believe that they are at lower risk than peers for heart attacks, cancer, even food-related illnesses like salmonella. And more interesting, most people claim that they're more likely than their peers to provide an accurate self-assessment. And so the people who are the least skilled were found to be the most likely to overestimate their abilities. Now, one of the most common places where you may have experienced this is in the workplace. As social scientists have studied people who quit their jobs during the pandemic, the so-called Great Resignation, the most common complaint people had about their old jobs was the quality of management. Often people in management stink. This happens because of the Dunning-Kruger effect. The manager knows a little about what you do and how you do it, but he or she assumes they know a lot. The result, micromanagement, ineffective leadership, and the whole list of things that bad managers do. Because the Dunning-Kruger effect is something the brain does by default, one has to remember not to fall for it. The way you avoid the mistake of thinking you know more than you do is to get that your brain will create that illusion and then not mistake that illusion for reality. Always assume there is more going on than you know, so double check. Ask for input and advice. Don't just assume you're an expert. When you have to deal with someone who's acting like a know-it-all, I have found a couple of guidelines to be helpful. First, remember this illusion of thinking one knows more than one does is normal and ubiquitous. It's everywhere. Therefore, don't trash talk someone who's doing it, nor get mad at them. They really can't help it unless they've had a lot more training than they probably have had. Second, when confronting them with evidence, that their knowledge is deficient, you will have a better time if you instead ask questions that might help the speaker realize that there are things he or she isn't aware of. And when they do realize that, help them save face. It keeps them from tightening their position. So, if we cut the staffing of the department, as you suggest, boss, what should we do about the government's regulatory requirement that certain staffing levels are mandated? And just let them process that. Now, this might work or it might not. There are people out there who are not high quality, and when confronted by something unexpected, they become defensive, hostile, or mean-spirited. And there's not much one can do about them except to avoid such people. But if anything will work, keeping your cool and asking questions will help. Hey, thank you for your time and attention today. I'll be back next week with another talk on a different subject, and I'd like to invite you to join me. It does help me if you let others know about my work and my videos, so please like, share, and subscribe. And if I can be of help to you, feel free to reach out through email, my website, telephone, or my Patreon channel. Have a good week.